This is going to be your pre-trip inspection. It takes 30 minutes to complete from start to finish. Here we go. As we approach the vehicle, we make sure it's not leaning left to right. There's no fluid leaks underneath it, no debris dragging the ground. Check my ID marker lights, my turn signals. Make sure they're amber in color, they're clean, not cracked or broken. My headlights are clean, clear, not cracked or broken. Head over to the exhaust. Check all of my exhaust system. Make sure none of it is cracked or broken. No cracked, broken, or missing bolts. All the clamps are in place, and there's no soot to indicate a leak. Okay. Then we go up to the engine compartment. Start from the bottom. We're going to check our washer fluid. Make sure we have plenty of washer fluid. We're going to check our antifreeze, make sure it's between add and full. We're going to check our upper, our lower radiator hose, and our coolant hoses. Make sure none of them are split, cracked, all clamps are in place, and none of them are leaking. We're going to check our alternator. Make sure it's securely mounted, no cracked, broken, or missing bolts. There's no frayed, bare wires. The belt itself is less than 3/4 inch of play, and it's not dry rotted or ripped. We're going to check our water pump. Make sure it's not cracked or broken. There's no leaks. It's gear driven, and there's no missing bolts. We're off to the other side. We're going to check our power steering fluid, and we'll make sure it's between add and full. Check all of my power steering hoses. Make sure none of them are ripped or torn, all the connections are tight, none of them are leaking, and all the clamps are in place. And we'll follow the hose down, and we'll find my power steering pump. Make sure the power steering pump has no cracked, broken, or missing bolts. It's not cracked or broken itself, it's not leaking, and it's also gear driven. Then I'm going to check my air compressor. Make sure the air compressor itself is not missing any bolts. It's not leaking. It's gear driven. And I'm going to check my oil level and make sure it's between add and full. I'm going to check the steering shaft, pitman arm, the drag link, the steering knuckle, and then the tie rod itself. Make sure none of them are cracked, bent, or broken. All the castle nuts and cotter pins are in place, and every joint, including the U-joint, is properly greased. Check my front spring mount and my rear spring mount. Make sure there are no cracked, broken, or missing bolts. They're not bent, cracked. And I'm going to check my leaf springs. Make sure they're properly aligned, no cracked, broken, or missing leaves. The U-bolts themselves are in place. They're not cracked or broken. There's no shiny spots on my springs to indicate a loose U-bolt. I'm going to check my shock absorber. Make sure there's no cracked, broken, or missing bolts. Make sure the shock absorber itself is not cracked or broken and it's not leaking. I'm going to go to the air hose. Make sure my air hose is properly mounted on each side. It's not dry rotted or ripped. It's not leaking. And the ABS line is not frayed or cut. And the brake chamber. Make sure the brake chamber is not dented, not damaged. The clamp is in place. There are no missing bolts, and it's not leaking. Push rod is properly attached to my slack adjuster. All pins and cotter pins are in place. Okay. Neither one are bent or cracked. With the brakes released and the wheels chalked, the slack adjuster will not move more than 1 inch. Brake linings, they're not worn dangerously thin, they're not cracked or broken. There's no oil or grease to indicate an inner seal leak. Then the brake drum itself is not cracked or broken, and no unauthorized welds. Inside and outside of my tire, no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. Tire evenly worn, no tread separation. Has at least 4/32 of an inch of tread. With the tire thumper or pressure gauge, I would check for proper inflation. Okay. The valve stem itself is straight, not cracked or broken, and it has a metal cap. I'm going to check the rim, make sure it's not cracked, bent, or broken. Has no unauthorized welds. Check all the lug studs and nuts, make sure they're all present, none are missing. No running rust or shiny threads to indicate a loose lug. Check the hub seal, make sure there are no missing bolts, none of them are cracked or broken. It's not leaking, has a proper fluid level. If I could not see it, I'd pull that center plug out and stick my finger in it. Okay. At this point, I'm going to close and latch the hood. Check my fuel tank. Make sure it's not cracked or bent. Make sure the straps, no missing bolts or pins. The rubber is behind the straps to protect the tank. The tank itself is not cracked or broken. It's not leaking. Check my steps and my catwalk. Make sure there are no missing bolts. Okay, and it's free of debris. It will also hold my weight. Check my turn signal lens, make sure it's amber in color, it's clean, it's not cracked or broken. Check my driver's window, or my mirror rather, make sure there's no missing bolts, it's not cracked or broken. The glass itself is clean, it's not cracked or broken. The door opens and closes freely. Lift up on the hinges, make sure the hinges are tight, not cracked or broken. At this point, I'm going to jump in and do my in-cab. Would you join me, please? Now, get in, close the door. First thing you're going to do is check your seatbelt. Make sure it's not ripped or torn, and it locks properly. My fire extinguisher is over here next to the door. Make sure it's a 10 BC fully charged fire extinguisher. My 3 reflective triangles, which are underneath the seat. And this particular vehicle is equipped with breakers. Okay. Check my clutch and my shifter to make sure they're not catching or binding. Okay. I'm going to perform a safe start. Activate the key. Make sure my ABS light comes on and goes out, which it did. Okay. And I'm going to start it. Make sure my oil pressure comes up within 5 seconds or I'd shut my vehicle off. Okay. And I'm going to use up on the clutch. That completes my safe start. Okay. Then I'm going to check my water temperature. Make sure it rises as my engine runs. I'm going to make sure my air pressure is rising. That's my water temperature. Make sure my air pressure is rising as my engine runs. I'm going to make sure my voltmeter is reading at least 14 volts. Alright. Now, go from left to right. Make sure both my mirrors are properly adjusted for me. The windshield is clean, not cracked or broken. It has no unauthorized stickers. And it is also clean. Check my left turn signal. My right turn signal. 4-way flasher switch. Make sure they're both working. Both the indicators. Single switch over here on the bottom. Activate all your lights. Okay. And then the high beam is in the turn signal switch. Make sure the high beam indicator is working properly. Okay. Alright. Make sure I have less than 2 inches of play in my 20-inch steering wheel. Air horn button. City horn. They're both working. Alright. My defroster. Make sure it's working. My heater. Make sure it's working. I'm going to make sure my wiper blades have a proper tension against my windshield. They're not ripped or torn. And my washer fluid is working. Alright. Now I'm up to air pressure. I'm going to do my brake check. Pushing the clutch, grab the lowest gear. I'm going to release my tractor brakes, checking my trailer brakes. I'm going to give it a slight tug forward. Just need to feel the RPMs drop a little. That's all you need. Pull the tractor back out. Release the trailer brakes, you're checking the tractor brakes. Again, just a slight tug. Right there is all you need. Now, I'm going to release both brakes. I'm going to roll forward 5 miles an hour, hit the brakes, make sure the vehicle does not pull left or right. They just want to see you move. That's good. It did not pull left or right. At this point, shut the vehicle off. Turn the vehicle right back on, leaving it in gear. Ease up on the brake, make sure it locks into place. Step on the brake pedal. After my initial drop, my foot on the brake, I will not lose more than 4 psi in 1 minute. Okay, it's been a minute. The examiner is going to tell you go ahead. Now I'm going to pump my brakes down. I'm going to get my warning indicator to activate. It's going to happen above 60. There they are. That happened right at about 60 psi. I'm going to pump my brakes down. I'm going to get both my valves to pop out. That's going to happen between 20 and 45 psi. Now watch your valves. They may come out at different times. They both came out, and they came out roughly at about 35 psi. You got to point at the gauges. Okay. At this point, this completes your in cab. Okay. If you would, kick it back in neutral. Go ahead and deactivate the key and leave the lights on. And exit the vehicle. Right here, you're going to complete your pre-trip. I'm going to check my frame. Make sure the frame is not cracked, bent, or broken. No unauthorized welds or drill holes. Okay. Check my electrical line. Make sure it's not frayed or cut. Both safety latches are over each end of the electrical cord, here and here. Okay. Then I'm going to check my air hoses. Make sure none of them are ripped or torn, properly attached to the cab and the trailer. Okay. Now make sure the glad hands and the seals are not ripped or torn, and they're not leaking, and the air hoses are not leaking. Okay. Check the bulkhead. Make sure it's not bulged out to indicate a shifted load. Check the clearance lights at the top. Make sure they're amber in color. They're clean, not cracked or broken. And they're working properly. And we'll come down. Check the apron of my trailer. Make sure there's no missing welds and no big gaping holes in the apron. And we'll come down. I'm going to make sure there's no gap between the platform, or the apron rather, and the skid plate. And I'm going to make sure the skid plate itself is not cracked or broken. It's properly greased. And all the pins and cotter pins are in place. It's also properly attached to my platform. The platform itself is not cracked or broken. It's also properly mounted to the frame. There are no missing bolts. My release handle is all the way in the locked position. Since I'm right here, I'm going to go ahead and talk about my front spring mount. Front spring mount has no missing bolts. It's not cracked or broken or bent. I'm going to talk about my spring and my torque spring. Make sure there's no missing bolts. Bushings in place. It's straight or properly aligned. Okay. Since I can't reach back in here, I'm going to kind of stick my stick back here, and I'm going to make sure my U-bolts are in place, not cracked or broken. Okay. And there's no shiny spots on my springs to indicate a loose U-bolt. Alright, now to finish up the suspension, I'm going to talk about my shock absorber. Make sure it's not cracked, bent, or broken. It's not leaking, and there are no missing bolts. And then the airbag. Airbag mounts are not cracked or broken, not missing any bolts. Airbag itself is not dry rotted or cut, and it's not leaking. Okay. And that completes the suspension. We have to go up front and talk about the drive shaft. Continue down. Drive shaft itself is not twisted or bent. U-joints are properly greased, and there are no missing bolts. Okay. Then we talk about the brake chamber and the hoses. Hoses in the ABS line, the hoses are not dry rotted or leaking. They're properly attached on both sides. ABS line, there are no frayed wires. Okay. Oh, pardon me. The brake chamber, there are no missing bolts, not cracked, bent, or broken. The clamp is in place, and it's not leaking. The slack adjuster